Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today we are talking cheap versus expensive fishing rods. What do you get for your money? Is it worth it? Is it something you should do? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? When is one better than another? That's what we're talking about today. Let's jump into it. This topic comes up constantly for us. Probably the number one question that people ask regarding rods and reels is, do they need expensive gear to catch bass? Do you need to buy high-end equipment? The answer is quite simply no, you don't. Let's get that out there right up front. Before I start talking about the benefits or issues, know that you do not need to spend a pile of money to go out and catch a bass. You can catch them on the cheapest equipment on the market, from the shore, in a pond, and have a blast. But bass fishing, like many sports, is something that you can fine-tune and fine-tune and fine-tune and get better and better and better and take it to whole different levels that in the beginning you didn't even know existed. So there is a place for high-end gear, but you do not need it. This is a difficult subject because it's probably also the largest source of hate in the comments section that we get on YouTube. Tim and I constantly catch heat for the combos that we recommend, and it wouldn't matter what we recommended. The heat would come. Whether you recommended a $1,000 combo or a $40 combo, there's going to be somebody that doesn't like it because it's all opinion based. So what we're going to do today is talk about advantages and disadvantages. You can draw your own conclusions, but I'm also going to give you some very specific recommendations at the end based on value, not based on price, based on value. So coming out the gate, I didn't bring everything with me out here. I just brought a sampling of rods, 13 Fishing, Abu Garcia, Daiwa reel, Daiwa rod with a Shimano reel, Shimano combo, edge rods, Megabass, G Loomis, Dobbins. I just brought you guys a sampling of stuff. The purpose of that is to tell you that we've done some research on this subject. I'm not going to sit here and try and give you an opinion that is uneducated. Again, this is opinion, but it's based on time on the water, experience on the water. So let's get into it instead of just rambling about it. Advantages of budget rods first. Let's start there. Why go cheap? Well, price. Price is why you go cheap. Save some money. But it's more than that. There's a second built-in advantage that you may not be aware of. Virtually every budget-friendly rod is going to have slower action. So what that means, when you pick up a fishing rod at the store and you shake it, you see everybody shake them. What somebody is trying to feel is how that rod is going to bend. That's what everyone wants to know. So a faster rod, you're just getting the bulk of that light movement right up in the tip, and then it straightens out pretty quickly. The next rod will bend farther. That rod's getting slower as more of that rod is loading up. So one rod will just bend in the tip. Of course, if you load up on a great big fish, more of it will bend. But just the tip section is softer than the rest. At the other end of the spectrum, you have what we call parabolic, where the entire rod just turns into a big arc. Parabolic is as slow as you get, a true arc where the entire thing is the same. The less money you spend on a rod, the more parabolic it will be. Now, you can buy parabolic rods that cost a ton of money, but that's just a built-in feature of a budget rod. So what's the advantage of that? Well, if you are fishing a lot of your reaction baits, crankbaits in particular, anything with a treble hook, it's a lot harder for a fish to come off on a more parabolic rod, which actually makes that parabolic style or a budget rod really, really user-friendly for a newer angler. So not only are you saving money, you are also getting a rod that is inherently easier for you to keep a fish hooked on, assuming you're using a bait with treble hooks. As soon as you start switching over to big single hooks like this, that's a completely different story, because then you need a rod that has more strength, that's stouter, that has a faster action to keep those fish hooked up. But can you catch a bass on any rod? Absolutely. So as you move up the spectrum, as you pay more money, what do you get besides a different look, a different action? Well, as you move up the spectrum, a couple of things are going to happen. The rods are going to become vastly more sensitive. That is the first thing that the average, well, actually that's not true. That's the first thing you notice on the water. The first thing you notice in the store when you pick one up is that they're incredibly lightweight. Now, does that matter to the guy that goes out there once a month? Probably not. So you probably don't need to spend $1,000 on a combo. But if it's something that you do a lot, particularly if you have any sort of injuries, if you're a person that's ever hurt your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, anything like that, the lighter the combo, the easier it is for you to fish throughout the day. The less likely that you'll get fatigued. And that's something that a lot of people overlook. All the other arguments aside about sensitivity and all that, fatigue is a major factor. So if you've ever had injuries where you end up getting fatigued throughout the day, your shoulder gets sore and you can't flip anymore, or your wrist starts getting tired and you can't throw a jerkbait, going to a higher end combo that literally weighs less will make your life so much easier. I've brought that up so many times when I talk about flipping, because my great big flipping sticks made all the difference. I used to hate flipping. At least I thought I did, until I got the right rod. Turned out that I always liked flipping, but I was using rods that were too heavy. They were wearing me out. See, for as long as I've been fishing, I've fished my whole life. I've been a trophy bass fisherman for probably 20 years. Specifically targeted monster bass. Even through that time, I went from really low-end equipment to mid-range equipment, and I stayed there. It wasn't until just the last few years that I really jumped into high-end tackle. You guys see a lot of times in the videos Tim and I using just incredibly high-end equipment. And I think some people are shocked by that. Some people appreciate it. You have to realize everyone watches, right? Both ends of the spectrum. And it's easy to assume that everybody feels the same way you do, which is of course just not the case, no matter which end of the spectrum you're on. But again, I waited a long time to sample high-end equipment. And when I did, I found some real changes in my fishing. So what happens when you go to high-end gear? What changes? The rods are going to get inherently faster actioned. The truly high-end, ultra-sensitive stuff, your NRXs, your edge rods, your Megabass destroyers, Daiwa Stees, those rods are inherently very, very fast unless they blend a rod for something specific like a crankbait. But that means that the majority of the blank does not have a lot of flex. It's just up there in the tip. So for some techniques, that's not a great thing, right? For cranking, for maybe a chatterbait, possibly for a spinnerbait, for a lot of that reaction stuff, you want some load up in the rod. So you want to choose your rods accordingly. You'll notice even when Tim and I are using high-end gear, we're not sitting on one brand or one model of rod. We pick up one rod for one thing, one rod for another thing. That's because we want those action changes. I'm not going to try and drop shot and crankbait and flip and do all these things with a rod that is the same. So I appreciate that high-end tackle because I love the sensitivity. I love the lightweight. And when you get on the water is where the sensitivity comes in. There are guys all the time that say, you know, I could feel the same thing with this rod or that rod as you feel with that high-end combo. And the truth is, if a fish comes out and freight trains your bait, that's true. I could feel a bass come out and absolutely smash on a bait on the world's cheapest ugly stick or anything else. But when it's wintertime and you're deep fishing and the fish are just mouthing baits, if you've never used a high-end rod, you don't know that there are bites that you can feel on those rods that you cannot even feel on a mid-range combo. You just can't. They are more sensitive. They really are. It makes a difference. So you have to find where you land in this whole thing. One end or the other or somewhere in the middle. And it comes down to budget. Lightweight, sensitive. It's going to matter for fatigue. It's going to matter for feeling fish. And then the biggest factor, the biggest one to me, is fun. That's why you came fishing in the first place. You didn't come out to the lake to be miserable, right? You came to the lake to get away from everything else and have a good time. And I will tell you point blank that in my experience, I have more fun with higher end tackle because I'm less aware of the tackle. It becomes a part of my arm. When I pick up a really nice combo and I'm going down the bank fishing, I'm not aware of the combo. I'm not realizing late that I got a bite. I feel right away, I stick my fish, I get them in the boat, I'm on to the next one. I just don't even think about it. And that's what you want. When you're out there fishing, you don't want to be stressing about your gear. When you pick up lower end gear, I'm aware of it, right? I go to make a cast and it won't let that bait fly the way I want it. I don't get as far, I don't hit where I wanted to be. Or I go to pick up and I'm not sure it's a fish and then darn it, that was a fish and I miss them. And then the next one works perfectly and I get them. But throughout the day, I'm aware of my equipment because it's not behaving exactly the way I wanted. When I get my gear dialed, I forget that I have gear. Isn't that crazy? That's the trade-off. What is the best result of you spending an outrageous amount of money on a combo and then going to the lake? What's the best thing that could happen? You could forget that you own the combo. Because you want to cast there and you cast there. You want to cast there, you cast there. You want to go over here and you feel a bite and you stick them and you get your fish. And then you cast there and it works perfectly. Your ultimate goal, whether you realize it or not, is to not know that there's a rod in your hand and just have a good time. So, all of that said, let's circle back around. Why does this matter? Because Tim and I constantly either recommend rods in our video descriptions or link you the exact gear that we were using in our video descriptions of every video. And when we do that, it's intentional. So I want to explain where those recommendations come from, and then I'm going to make some right now at different budgets. The reason why you don't see us typically recommending really, really inexpensive gear is because when you get below a certain threshold, a lot of the gear is extremely similar, and you don't need our opinion. If your budget is 20 bucks for a rod, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you're going to catch plenty of fish on it. But you don't need us to tell you which one to get. You can just go get a combo and go fishing. If your budget's 50 bucks for a rod or 60 bucks for a combo, now you're getting into that ballpark where there are some differences, but they're not huge differences. Right? We recommended this combo recently, that Daiwa Airdex with a Sahara. And that was the lowest priced combo that we'd specifically recommended at that point. And it was because I picked it up and fished with it for a few days. And we actually took this combo cross-country with us on our entire cross-country trip and used it a bunch. And I was very impressed over and over again. So it actually stood out from the crowd. And that's when you're going to get a recommendation. So generally speaking, the threshold where all of a sudden there are real differences between combos is a $100 rod or a $100 reel. That's where one company's got it dialed and the next one doesn't. And then you move up 20 bucks and now this company's got it dialed and that one doesn't. But the changes are real. That's why we cut it off there at about that $100 mark. And at that price point, the two that stand out to me today, just like they have before, Dobbins Rods makes the Fury line of rods. Now, they've got kind of a bright color to them. Some people don't like that. They've got some green on them. They're black and green. But those Fury rods, right around that $100 range, are unreal. They are so good for the money. So if you want to step up and try nicer gear than you've used before, that's one. And the other one is an SLX. Shimano came out with the SLX rods and SLX reels, which is really nice. They are sweet at 99 bucks a piece. They are significantly different from the other rods that I've used in those price ranges. It's drastic. A Fury and an SLX, in my opinion, are drastically different than a lot of the price point gear that they're up against. That's why we talk about them. That SLX reel at 99 bucks, here's a test for a reel. There are two ways to test on. One is to buy one and use it a whole bunch and see if it holds up. And that's important because a reel that doesn't break down over time is super important. But that one takes time. The quick test that you can do is pick up a rod, pick up a combo, close your eyes, ignore what combo it is, and either cast it. If you're not in a store, you can cast it out and reel it back. If you're just in a store, just reel. But if you can't tell the price of what's in your hand, and what I mean by that is I'll pick up a high-end combo, sling it out there, and that sucker is smooth, it's light, it feels great, there's no vibration. And then I'll pick up a really cheap combo and I'll fire that out there, and it grinds, it's harder to turn the handle. You can feel the gears themselves. It's completely different. If you can pick up a combo somewhere in the middle and sling it out there and close your eyes and forget what combo you're using, and it's smooth and it's not working against you, there's your bang for the buck. And I really like the SLX because when I close my eyes, it feels great. It feels a lot like a Corrado. Now, there are some actual differences on the inside, but I'm talking feels terrific. So moving up in price from there, you're going to get to the X Pride, and that's my next jump, and it's a big jump. And that's not to tell you there's not great rods in between. There are, but it's not my job to point out at every $20 price break. What I want to do right now is tell you the rods that are like, they have stepped way outside their budget, in my opinion. And the X Pride is that next one that's just like, it walks away from the crowd. And the X Prides have been really hard to get this year. But a lot of the models are back in stock. They're $279 to $299. They are not cheap. But what they are is amazing. They fish. I mean, I'm very blessed to own a lot of really high-end gear. And when I just jump on the boat to go for a couple of hours, and I look down, I have surrounded myself with X Prides without thinking about it. Because at $279, they fish like rods in the 400s. They're really, really nice rods. And then there's a bunch of different options, a bunch of different actions. They work well, they overlap well. So you can pick up like a 610 medium, one of my favorites, or a 7.2 heavy, or a 7.2 medium heavy, or a 7.6 heavy, or a 7.7 heavy. Those are models that are going to do a lot of different things. There's a lot of carryover. Of course, there's rods like the 7.3 extra heavy. That's our frog rod, but it's a specific rod, right? It's got one job for me. But a rod that can do a lot of things is fantastic. But those X Prides at $279, they behave like a very, very high-end rod, and that's why we talk about them a lot. Going just up from that, this is a Megabass. And we started playing with Megabass more, I don't know, I got my first Megabass a few years ago. But I started playing with them more and more, and I started trying Orochis a couple years ago. Then they redesigned the Orochis to these in 2018. And there's a handful of models of Orochis that again, I feel like they really step it up. They're vastly different than the other options that surround them. Now, you're right up, I don't want to misquote a price, but I think they're right up around that $300 mark. The Orochis, I see them differently. So X-Prides, what I love about an X-Pride is I can pick up a model and use it for 15 different things. The Orochi is the opposite for me. Like, this is the Brailless that I have in my hand. It is, to me, an amazing, amazing jig rod, and I use it for that niche. Megabass makes very nichey, very action-specific rods. So if you're trying to get into a line of rods, that's a whole different thing. X-Pride, Zodius, SLXs, Furies, they make rods that just cover the gamut. You get a handful of rods and you're good to go. But if you're a guy that already owns a ton of tackle and you're looking for a really nice flipping stick, a really nice frog rod, a really nice jerkbait rod, just that niche rod, Orochis are awesome for the price to fill those very specific things if you want to try something different. And then the last one, the highest end I'm going to go right now, is a GLX. And why I'm stopping at a GLX today, because in the past I've talked a lot about NRXs. NRXs, that's a G Loomis, by the way, if you're not familiar with it. Let me pick it up anyway. G Loomis NRX. An NRX is, in my opinion, the industry standard of sensitivity. Now, there will be people that argue one way or another. This rod's more sensitive than that, or this one's more sensitive than that. None of that matters. What I'm saying is that it's a benchmark. It's been insanely sensitive for a really long time. So a lot of times when a company will come out with a rod, a guy will come to argue, and he's like, this rod is more sensitive than an NRX. And my thinking is, well, I don't care if it's more sensitive or not. The NRX, clearly the benchmark, right? That's what you're bringing a rod to market to try to compare to. They're amazing. They are not cheap, but they are amazing, and it really is different. Those are probably my favorite high-end rods. That's what a lot of Tim and I's super high-end spinning tackle has converted to, is NRXs, because when you're smallmouth fishing or spotted bass fishing and you're really trying to catch that giant fish and you need everything to go right, it makes a difference. But today, one step down from an NRX is a GLX. The reason why I wanted to talk about that, the GLXs are in the 400s. Again, it's a lot of money for a rod. They are not as sensitive or as light as an NRX, but they are really, really sensitive and really, really, really light, and will do a fantastic job of any job that you ever need them to do. Now, if you're trying to go cream of the crop, best of the best, spend the extra money to an NRX. But if you're a guy that has just always wanted an ultra sensitive rod, an ultra light rod, and you want to try one, and that extra $100 does make or break the deal, GLXs are fantastic. The other thing about a GLX is, you know, I'm always playing with rods. I have such an addiction to them. The MBR series, MBR. So a lot of G Loomis rods end with a JWR. It's a split grip handle, and it's a different bend in the rod. MBR stands for Megabass rod. The Megabass series is really unique. They're pretty stout in the midsection, but the tips are way light, like way lighter than you expect. The 843 and the 844 MBRs are amazingly versatile rods. I mean, we took them cross country, and I would be on one lake and I'd need to throw a fluke or a Senko, and I'd tie it on my 844. And then I'd get to the next lake and I'd be in a pinch, and I'm like, oh, I want to throw a spinnerbait. I don't want to retie. I'd tie it on the same rod. And then all of a sudden fish are blowing up, and I'm like, forget it. Give me that spook. And you tie your topwater on the same rod, because the tip section is so soft that if I'd hit a topwater fish and I just didn't force it, that tip would absorb. But if I'm throwing a spinnerbait and a great big one eats it, like what happened on Chickamauga, then I can really hit them hard. I could get through that soft tip into the backbone and stick that fish too. That MBR series is really interesting to me, and I will be playing with those a lot more. I wish there were more MBR actions in the lineup. There's only a few, but you talk about versatile rods. Those are awesome rods. Now, GLX is not an inexpensive rod, but it's a rod that can do so many things. I was very, very impressed with them because I'm normally very nichey. You know, I have my favorite jerkbait rod, my favorite frog rod, and I'll overlap, but I like those specific actions. I like my jig rods. You guys know that. But I was impressed that in a pinch, I could tie a dozen different baits onto the same rod and just go and make it work. So again, let's recap. There are some drastic differences. Do you need to spend $1,000 on a combo, or $1,200 or $1,500 or $2,000 on a JDM combo? No, you do not. If you do it, will you feel a difference? You will. They are more sensitive. They are lighter. They are smoother, and they just become a part of you, and everything just flows. The frustration goes away. Can you get into the mid-range and get some amazing gear that will do almost the same thing? You sure can. And you know we're linking all that stuff I just talked about down there in the video description. Guys that are just coming in or on a budget or don't fish as often, are you doing just fine with the gear you've got? Absolutely. You don't need to have guilt. You don't need to argue with the next guy. Don't even sweat it. Just go fishing because the gear works. The right answer is it worth it? Yes. Do you need to do it? No. That's the final answer. Enjoy the gear you've got. If you want to step out, if it's in your budget, we've got some recommendations for you. If not, keep on trucking. Have a blast, because that is what bass fishing is about. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.